Okay, so what I have here, I'm getting old, so I need my glasses, is a track which I made. And what I did is, with the experience I have of students coming in with these mid-level tracks, I dialed it down to mid-level. So this is how I get a lot of tracks from students that say it's not sounding professional. And I'm going to run you through the essential steps to get from this mid-level to high level. And I'm going to just focus on the core of the song, which is the thing you see in the screen is all I'm going to talk about. So it's a very small part of the song. I'm just going to play it for you, and then we're going to discuss like what you feel about it, and then say, okay, what should we improve to make it better? So let's hear it. So how do we improve? The first thing, as I said, is to get quality sounds, right? What I did with this is use Ableton sounds. And I'm not saying it's bad. Ableton sounds are not bad, but they are very unprocessed. And that means, and I always tell students, production is a craft that consists out of multiple crafts. So it used to be multiple crafts, because if you were in the 80s or the 70s and you would walk into a producer studio, it would be like a room filled with gear, like a lot of gear, like a lot of keyboards, compressors, racks, you name it, like a board of mixing, like everything was there. And if you go to Michael Jackson, like a Thriller production, right? That album was produced by maybe 20 to 30 people, like instrumentalists, like people that played the instruments, but also people that programmed the synths, to the sound engineer, to, well, a lot of people were in the same studio working on the same song at the same time. And that changed, and that's because of this little thing. It means that I can do all those things with my laptop, but it doesn't mean I have knowledge of all these different professions. And I always tell my students, you don't have to have that, because if you want to, if you would want to be at a level that you are the only guy to control that whole environment, even though somebody like Quincy Jones just orchestrated it, he didn't control anything, had a team working for him that did everything in the composition that he wanted to be that way. Michael Jackson just offered a demo, like most people maybe heard the demo of Billie Jean, sounds pretty like whack, would never become a hit song in the demo version that he could actually produce. So he had the whole team of production guys and instrumentalists playing that song over and over in a new way, so it became a pro level song. And the thing is, you don't need to know all these things, because the advantage of today is that you can actually have all those sounds ready-made for you. And that's the fun part of producing today. And that's why it's so low-level entry. And you can all get a professional sound like instantly. And how is it done? Well, getting those sounds. And we talked about Splice. Splice is like, it used to be the biggest site for samples. It might still be. But there's other competitors there, and there's a lot of sites where you can get samples. And samples are the way to go if you want straight out of the box professional made sounds. So what I'm going to start here is give you an example of the drums. So what I did is I took an Ableton drum kit, and what I actually did, I converted the sample that I used into this drum kit, which is this sound. This is totally unprocessed. It means the sounds aren't bad, but in order to make this sound big and fat, I would need a lot of knowledge to actually process this. From saturation to layering, to effects, to compression, timing, all these things I need to know a lot about to be able to convert this into a nice sounding drum kit. I could do that myself, but it also takes time. So why would I? If there are ready-made samples that I can just click on, select and say, ooh, this sounds nice. So what I came up with, like originally, was this sample. Sounds better, right? Sounds big, fat, compressed. In comparison to it's playing the same notes. Basic sounds like acoustic almost, right? It's like somebody drumming.
Sample and one is
One is sample. Of course, the other ones is samples as well. If we dive into this Ableton loop, these are MIDI notes as well. As you see, there are notes, but they're played by this drum rack. And this is the sounds. I can actually hear it when I press it. And these are samples too, but they're unprocessed. So there's nothing there, no layering, no effects. And that's why I would have to do that myself. So Ableton gives you these sounds, and they sound like that. So if I would compose the drums without knowing anything, this is what it would sound like. But I like this sample. So why would I do the effort? I used to do this back in the days just to say to people, but I made it myself. But you don't give a shit. If I play the song and it sounds professional, you will say, oh, he's probably a professional. Even though I might not have done anything to the original, like the things that are in there could be all samples. If you listen to Daft Punk, like their most famous album, most of the things are samples. They just sampled the shit out of unknown 70 songs, like played them around, cut, and they made it into these great compositions. But that was more about, as I said, the idea. Like, what are we going for? How are we going to use these samples? But the samples themselves weren't played or made. They were already there. And that's just the beginning of that era where nowadays, a lot of the songs you hear, maybe you know the song from Sabrina Carpenter, like Espresso. That's a very famous song nowadays. Why in the production world? Because it consists out of a drum loop and a guitar loop that were straight taken from Splice. I even saw a video yesterday of a guy that was actually remaking the whole song, and he didn't know that. So he had his YouTube, like I'm doing right now, like I'm actually composing the song and this is like complex and this is nice. And then some people in the comments were like, yo dude, the original production was taken from Splice. It's just Sabrina Carpenter and some added bass line, that's it. But it was taken from Splice samples. And it was a big hit, so nobody gives a shit where you get the samples or the sounds from. It's like getting the sounds that sound big. My focus for the song is the play parts, because I can. But if I couldn't, I might be a very technical guy that's into tweaking I'm not good at tweaking it to the level that's like nerdism. And the next workshop, the production workshop, will be a guy that will take you in the nerdism level like, oh damn, you know. I don't know a lot of what he's doing, but he's in a different genre, different style, where other things are more important. So in this case, I took a drum sample, but not only took a drum sample, I added some things to the drums to make it sound bigger. So there's extra hi-hats, as you see, extra open hi-hat. So this is my full drum kit. Now the next part that was added was a bass line. And if I listen to the bass line, this is a bass line I invented. And I'll just play the bass line. So a bass, I selected the deep hop bass from Ableton Instruments. As I said with the samples, the same goes for synthesized sounds from Ableton library. I'm not a big fan of them. Two reasons. It's not very organized, so you get a lot of different sounds that are not focused on a certain genre. It has to like make everybody happy. Because if you buy Ableton, Ableton doesn't know what kind of producer you are. So
Ableton MIDI?
Ableton MIDI sounds, yeah. So they're synthesizers, like analog synthesizers, can be sample based, but very often if I go through Ableton, just to give you an example of how they sound, this is one of the first things I address with people that want to play things themselves, not only use samples, is that if I go in, that instrument rack is a very nice way to see what kind of sound. Personally, if I scroll through this, I don't get excited, but that's personal. Maybe if you're in music that uses that kind of sounds, you are, but for me, it's not cool. So it's not like, yeah, I want to make a song with that sound. If I play that piano, which is a nice piano, I get inspired to play certain things in a certain way because the instrument and the sound inspires me. And that's what you should be looking for. Be it samples or like virtual instruments that you play via MIDI, you should always feel like, oh, this is cool. This is the best. And this is the part where I say, if you're a cook, you should be inspired to get that piece of meat from that one farmer up the hill that has this really nice tasting meat, right? If you go for meat, if you're not vegan. But you're not going to go to the Lidl to buy the best piece of meat. So I would always say invest time in searching and money to get the high quality sounds, because they will make your sound more professional. In this case, if I take this bass sounds from Ableton, for me it's boring, it's dull. I'm not saying you couldn't use it, but you would have to compose a song where other instruments take up the other frequencies and together it will build a nice sound. But what I did is I produced it with several sounds taken from Contact, from Serum and Massive. Those are professional virtual synthesizers, so you have to pay money for them. But then what you pay for is professional made sound. And it's not always the technical side, like the synthesizer has been developed in a certain way. No, it's the programmers. It's the guys that make the sounds. And they know so much about sound, and they also know how to compose nice sounds. That's why those synthesizers, which will cost you about 200 to 400 euros, they will sound a lot better out of the box, straight out of the box. So if I go to, what I did is make a combination of those sounds, which is called layering. And this is the second part of making nice sounds. It has to be layered. Layered means that I play one and the same part played by different instruments. So if this is my bass, this is a sub bass, it's a very low bass. This is just one of the basses I use in the production. So if I add another one, this is another one, a synth bass. Together, it will sound bassy and it has a nice like accent to it. Then I add another one and that's a more like this kind of sound. So then we already have 3 layers within one sound. And then I have a fourth one playing certain accents. So certain notes are accented. So the bass line gets way more exciting than this one. It's boring. And if you would listen to, and that's why it's nice as a DJ as well, if you would listen to songs you like, the key of becoming a good producer is analyzing the music, is listening with the ear of a producer. I would always say, compared to the music, to the movie The Matrix, at a certain point he sees the matrix, which means he sees what everything is built of and how it works. And if you look at something and you have no clue what you're looking at, you don't know what you can see. If this was a piece of art and I have no interest in art, I just see a picture. If I'm into art, I will see so many layers of how it's built that will be a totally different picture for me. And music is the same thing. If I just listen flat to music, I will hear something that gives me a certain vibe or emotion or groove. But if I'm a producer, I would be listening to every single separate part of that song. Be it individual sounds, be it layers, be it the structure. Like all these things can be analyzed. And the better you are at that, and that's what all the great producers have done to become great producers, is listen the shit out of the songs that they like. And one of the things is to focus on these layers. So never think that if you listen to a professional production, you will only hear one layer. It's mostly multiple layers. And that's the difference between something sounding so thin or something sounding bigger like this.
You can also do that with kicks?
You can do it with kicks, but you have to be aware of what you put together. And I'll dive into it a little bit more in detail, because just to give you an example, if I look at these basses and I can compare this to a kick, I need to be sure what area of frequencies a certain sound takes. So if I have this sub bass, as you see here, this is an EQ. Equalizer means the same as in your DJ set. I can control low, mid and high frequencies, but in a very nuanced way. So what you see is that I have the sub bass only playing the low part, which means if I play it solo, if I turn off the EQ, it sounds like this. So it has high frequencies as well, but if I turn it on, it sounds really dull and dark. And I need it to sound that way, because if I add another instrument, they have to be like a puzzle. They have to fit together and don't overlap. If I take 2 kicks and just put them on top of each other, I will have a lot of low end, because that's doubling. It's the same when you mix with the basses, when you're mixing house music, right? They have to have their own area. So the next bass line, as you see, I've cut off low frequencies to make this sound less bassy than the sub bass. This one is even more extreme. It just gives this, but normally it would sound like this. It would be a bass on its own, but I only want to use this little part. And then like little pieces of puzzle, they fit together. And this as well. No bass there, just an accent. And together, they sound big and fat. So if I do that together with my drums, I already get kind of a nice sounding. That's a good solid foundation for a track. I could listen to this on its own, it's going to be boring because it's just a drum and a bass.
Is it normal using two bass in one track?
Yes, can be, yeah. And very often, just so you know, within a synthesizer, if I go into a serum sound itself, I'm not going to dive too deep into this, but this sound, this one sound will also, within the synthesizer, contain several synthesized sounds. So even one patch from a synthesizer also contains different octaves. Octaves are la, la, la. Together they shape a sound that sounds bigger. So controlling that means we have a lot of layering going on in one sound, and then adding different sound will even make it sound bigger, fatter. So if we continue, we now go to this annoying sample that, who said that was annoying? You said it was annoying, right? It was this one. That part, right? Okay, so I like the sample, so I wanted to use it, but here comes the next trick of making better productions, and that is, what am I going to use from a sample? This is uncut. This is just taken from a sample library, put it in, I looped it, that's my sample, and I have it played all the time. So if we go back to the original. Okay, so I'm going to switch up to the other version, so the better sounding version of the bass and the drums, and now adding the nice bass line, and I'm going to change the use of the sample. So what I'm going to do now is I've chopped up the sample. I'm not going to use it like it was, but I'm going to make it communicate with the bass, and that means communication means question and answer. It means one thing plays and then the other thing plays. And this is like normal communication. If we talk and want to have a nice conversation, we're not going to talk at the same time, right? And this is the same with music. And I compare it with movies a lot, which means if I have my main characters, like in the music, this part is very essential because it's loud and it's up there and everybody should hear the song is about the sample, then it should not be playing together with other main parts, because then it's hard for me to hear and differentiate what the sound it is I'm actually listening to. So splitting the sounds and having them playing at their own moment will make them communicate. So in this case, I took the sample that sounded like this and I made it into so I created a little groove within that sample, and that was in order to make it play nicely with the bass. So if I now add the bass and the drums, it will sound like. So now they communicate, right? It's not playing all the time the same. If I would switch to the other one, you hear the difference? Now there's silence as well. So moments of silence, and I never understood this when people say silence is also music. No, it's silence, right? No, but silence within a track at certain moments will really be just as essential as something that is playing at that time. So leaving space within your production is a very essential thing of high quality productions. You don't hear stuff all the time. It's the contrast between speaking and not speaking. If you listen to Obama speeching, the great thing about him, I'm very bad at this because I'm a little bit hyperactive, is that he will tell you something important, like less is more. And then just wait, you know, so it sinks in. It's like, oh, that must be really important. And that's the same with music. If I have something that is important, I will let it be there and then just add silence to emphasize what I just said or just heard. So what I also composed is that the next thing coming up was a synthesizer, and that's this synthesizer. Right? So now I'm going to actually switch this off, but just turn the normal tracks on, and then I don't have to switch so much back and forth. So we did the bass, drums, we did the sample. Next part would be this synthesizer. There's two things bad about it. The sound itself. Don't really like it. It's not engaging me. So what I originally did, again, I worked backwards, right? I worked into the badder track and didn't start off with the bad track. I started off with the good track, which is nice sound. It draws me in straight away. It has an atmosphere to it. It has a longer sound. It has depth. It has effects. And I changed the timing. So you heard that this one continues. So it's a loop, a very short loop. This one is just a little longer. Silence. So it's again A, B, right?
It's just like echo.
No, it's not echo. It's two separate. Yeah. And then this is silence, 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 silence. So if I now add this to the other parts, you will also hear that this has a reason, because now this will communicate with the sample as well. Here we go. So the synth is filling in certain gaps, and now they're communicating. And this makes sense, right? It's very clean, it's easy to listen to, it's dynamic, it's not boring straight away because it's not the same thing. So if you cut up samples and use them at a different timing, things will always be more interesting. And what we tend to do is take loops, and they always take about 8 beats. And then it repeats, right? And that's why people in productions get so bored at this mid-level thing. It's like, I've heard this over and over and it's getting so boring to my ears, I'm going to stop this production. So as soon as you get nice samples, chop them up and see what you can do to prolong the interesting parts of that song. Because it's interesting because something has to change continuously. If something keeps changing, you're like, okay, it's dynamic. But if it's static, our ears notice that, because loops are not natural. In our normal lives, loops are non-existent. Everything changes all the time. So if we are aware of something looping in music and nothing changes, it will be so boring quickly. So that's why we do this. So we have now that part. This is the full part playing. But you also heard that it went into a second part, right? That sounded different. And that's where a different melody came in, but the sample continued, everything continued. So if I now have this new composition and I listen to it and see what changes in the next part, and we'll leave some parts. So we were here, right? That's the part coming after this first part. It's different. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take this sample that I used all the time, I'm going to take it out. I want this second part to really sound different. So I want the sample that we placed in the first part, which was this one. This sample, I'm going to take it out in this second part. I have to focus on the melody, because the melody is now different. It's a lot cleaner, right? It's almost empty. It's better than this. It gets overcrowded. And I already heard that sample for a long time, so it's better to take it out and have this part playing clean. But there's something still wrong. And we talked about quality of sounds. This melody sounds, it's not interesting. It sounds kind of cheap. And I don't like the synth either. So again, to emphasize the sounds that are used by where's my synth? By Ableton are just not nice sounding. So I'm gonna show you what the sounds in Ableton are. So this synthesizer pad. A pad is a synthesizer on the background. So and certainly in the second part, this sounds starts with one note and then evolves into a chord. If I play it, right, it should provide kind of a background vibe. But it's an Ableton stock pad sound, so I don't like it. I'm gonna switch to a nice Omnisphere, which is one of the best synthesizers you can get. This sounds like this. It gives me more vibe than the other one. Or this. No, don't like it. Like this. So if I add that one, it will sound better. And then we go to the melodic part, which is over here. So we heard this synthesizer lead playing this. It's very static. I even put on some delay, so there are some effects because I didn't want to make it too big a difference. But if I go to a different sound, again I'm going to layer. So this is one layer of the melody, and it's very low, so it's going to cover my lower frequencies, and then I'm going to add another one. That's an octave up, higher, right? And it's a different sound, a little bit sharper. Sounds richer. Another one. Another octave, really high. But together, I'll play this part again. And then I'll have some extra notes here, playing here. Just to accent certain notes again. So again, 4 layers for just one melody. If I add that with a nice sounding pad, and take out the bad pad, and take out the bad lead. Nice accent here. So just little things that you might not be aware of. That's a big difference to what you heard in first instance, right? If we talk about frequencies, what we like to listen to is a rich song. A rich song contains of all frequencies, low, mid, high, and everything in between, right? Because frequencies can be very nuanced, like 1 hertz, or they can be broad in a sense that if I use an equalizer on a DJ mixer, it's very rough. The bass takes not only bass, but a lot of frequencies out. If I go to an equalizer and just show you some basic stuff, let's take a synthesizer sound. So the nice serum sound, let me see, this one. So it's not even playing all frequencies. If I were to do that, it would sound like this. And now it's also filtered, so it can also be sounding way more rich than this. I can see if I can quickly, oh yeah. Now this is the sound fully open. And with an EQ, it sounds like this. So if this was my only sound, so I made music with just one sound, I would make it sound this way. And I would even put in bass notes to have low frequencies. The complete song should provide me with all frequencies, because it will have my ears tasting everything, right? Just like a meal. If a meal's boring because it's just French fries, it's not, well, some people like just French fries, but let's say it's just broccoli, I would like to have other things to go with that. Maybe some sauce, maybe some whatever meat, to make it a complete sound tasting meal. With music it's the same. If my song, when it's all playing, has all these different frequencies and layers, it's entertaining to my ear. But if it's one layer and I need to fit it into the production, as you saw, this sound was sounding like this. More or less, right? So I took all the low frequencies off. Why did I do so? Because I already have a bass playing. and the bass is taking up all the low frequencies. Remember, I have had all these parts playing low frequencies. So it's like a puzzle. Again, if I use a bass, it's going to be, if I look at the EQ, that's going to be over here. So my sub bass can take the low frequencies, and sometimes I cut them off over here, so that's really, really low, and that's not audible for us. So underneath at 20 hertz, it's not audible, so I can take that off anyway. But it's a puzzle, so every new sound should take their own space within the song, and it's okay in certain parts of the song that not all frequencies are playing. So it's nice to have a filter starting a song, and I'll give you a little example of that. If you listen carefully, you will hear it. It starts in a filter, right? I don't hear high frequencies. I don't hear low frequencies. And this is a good example of how they can build it up. Because the next one, it opens up a little. Oh, that's more. But I still lack high frequencies and lows. Now it opens up, opens up, opens up. And now, now all frequencies are there. So it's really nice to have parts in music where they take this down and then they take it up. And that sounds really cool. So in the end, we want a nice, well, to answer your question, nice balance between all frequencies. A great song has only 5 main layers. It's, I always tell them you have a main character. That could be your lead, like somebody singing or a melody. You have a bass. You have drums, melody, bass, drums, synth, and synth is chords, but it could be something extra. But this fifth is also like an arp or a guitar in the background. If you do more than that, you will hear your song will start to be overcrowded. So if you can do with 5, and I'm not saying layers, because if you say layers, you see I have way more. I have 27 layers of music in this track. Drums also 5. That's also a great rule. Kick, snare, hi-hat, claps, percussion. But if you add a lot of drums, percussion, it's going to crowd your track again. It would have to be kind of an Afro house track where it's very focused on percussion. Maybe add a bass, but we're not adding another 4 instruments because then it will be overcrowded again. If you can do it less than 5, if you are playing a song that goes dum, 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 that's 2. There's drums and a bass, and then the voice comes in. That's 3, and that's a really strong song. So if you listen to the best songs, you will hear they will even have less than 5.